Welcome to Lightning Talks for Legal Innovators. Thank you all for being here. My name is Brittany Hernandez, and I'm your host for this Lightning Talk series in partnership with Gavel. I'm a lawyer, a Gavel expert and professional, no-code, low-code developer, a legal tech educator, and the global ambassador to law schools for Gavel. Today, Sukhi Dhillon Alberga, lawyer and founder of Bridging Legal Solutions, will discuss the topic balancing being a business lawyer and a legal techpreneur with a mind towards access to justice. So feel free to post your questions in the chat as you think of them, and Sukhi will pick them up once she concludes. After questions, I'll share some announcements and do a quick wrap up. After which, you're free to stay on the call for an optional 5 minutes of speed networking, where I'll invite a few people to introduce themselves for about 1 minute each. You can let me or Trisha know in the chat if you'd like to introduce yourself during that portion of the call. I'd now like to introduce today's speaker. As I mentioned, Sukhi is the founder of Bridging Legal Solutions, where she counsels startups and small businesses, healthcare and medical businesses, and medical device startups. Sukhi has an honors bachelor degree from the University of Toronto and a JD from Bond University. She also obtained the Osgood Certificate in Health Law from the Osgood Hall Law School of York University and is admitted to the bar in both Ontario and New Brunswick. She is a member of the Legal Futures Subcommittee for the Canadian Bar Association, a member of the Human Resource Committee of the Law Society of New Brunswick, and a member of the Law Society of New Brunswick Council. Thank you so much for being with us today, Sukhi. The floor is now yours.
Oh, thank you so much, Brittany, for having me. I'm so excited to be here today and to be able to talk to all of you and be along like-minded individuals. So it's pretty exciting. Thank you.
And so do you want to share a little bit with us about your journey into kind of this legal techpreneur space and how you kind of came up with these different ideas?
Sure, absolutely. So it was kind of funny the way it kind of started for me, because we're the first multidiscipline practice in Canada that actually have a law firm that practices both, like we do HR services and accounting services and legal services. I was already being innovative and pushing the envelope, right? And I actually had to get like permits from both law societies to do that, which was challenging and needed a lot of perseverance, but got them. So it was really great. So I was already kind of in that innovative space. And then I have clients who are like coming up with innovative ideas. So you're kind of always around that. And I remember thinking to myself, what more can I do to help our profession and also help the public? And I started to realize that there was a gap, and especially in business law. And so it kind of got my juices flowing. And then it was also the fact that I felt like public perception of lawyers was really tainted. And it was becoming really negative. And so it was like, well, why is that? Well, it's because the public's not educated on what we do and how we do it. Instead, there's a lot of the, AI chat GPT coming out and saying, well, like, do we really need lawyers? Like, there's a lot of stuff we can do online kind of thing. Do we really need lawyers? And the truth of the matter is, yeah, you do. When things are really complex and they're not so simple, you do need someone who has legal training to help you through that. And so for me, that just kind of got my juices flowing, and I wanted to do something about it. And I was a bit crazy enough and tenacious enough to say, okay, what can I do? And so I came up with a new idea. And of course, we're going to be launching very soon our new legal tech platform coming January. Also to mention that we are I'm an applicant of the Law Society of Ontario Access to Innovation Sandbox as well. And so just going through that whole journey and everything was just like, how do I go? How do I start? Where do I start? Where do I have to go? And I remember talking to a colleague and saying, who has some experience as a lawyer, but also in legal tech. Shout out to you, Zach, if you're listening. I remember him saying, Sukhi, your idea is a really great idea. And, do you know what platforms to use and things like that? I was like, no. And then he was educating me on it and said, why don't you consider this and that? And said, yes. And can't wait to disclose more of that journey in detail when we have our second podcast and once we launch, and I'll be able to speak more about it. The reason why I can't speak too much more about it, because I'm still in the application process. So just to clarify on that. But having said that, then it was like, okay, I found myself in a new world of completely new language, understanding code and things like that. And I didn't know anything. And I was completely green. I have to say this with great humility. I did not know anything. And it was like, okay, how do I do this? And it was just like, okay, you know what? This is what I want to achieve. This is what's in my head. How do I make it happen? And then it was just like, I guess, just gumption, and just going for it and saying, okay, this is going to be a hard trek, but I'm just going to do it. And it was long, painstaking hours and hours and hours. And of course, I'm running a new practice as well at the same time. I have two twins, 6-year-olds, a boy and a girl. And like, it's just, how do you balance all that? Right. And but you know what? I'm the type of personality is once I commit to something and I want to do something, I'm going to do it. And it took a lot of painstaking hours. Sometimes I'd be up till 72 hours straight working, and then working on this at nighttime on my idea and figuring it out. And then the help support that I had was so fantastic. I can't wait to talk about that as well in our next podcast too. And I think it was just persevering through all of it and just knowing that I was onto something, and the more I did it, the more it just flowed and made sense. And then being able to get really positive feedback from experts and learned individuals and saying, yeah, no, this is something, you got something here, was really encouraging and just kind of helped along the journey. And I think there was a lot of trial and error. I remember at one point, at one particular time, when it was just like getting the coding right, and then like, there's one character that was off and I couldn't figure out what was going on, and it was hours and hours. What the heck was that? But then when you got it, that feeling of, oh my goodness, that's what it is. Okay, figured it out. But that feeling of excitement of like, okay, yeah, I got it. I figured it out. And that excitement in itself was so rewarding that it just allowed you to push forward and keep persevering through. And then I think speaking with clients who themselves are on these journeys, and they're like, we're beta testing this and we're doing that, and I found myself doing the same. And then just because of my commitment to following through on the idea that I had, I found myself being a tech entrepreneur now. And it was like, I didn't really thought I was going to do this, but I'm stumbled into it. And it's like, okay, well, I'm in it, I'm committed. So let's get this thing done, and that's kind of what my journey has been thus far.
It's so inspiring to hear that as well. And I know many people who are, watching and on the call kind of have that same experience of, being a busy lawyer and having an idea. And I think we recently had a lunch and learn yesterday with Tracy Troyer as well, where we were just talking about this idea of distilling down what you're going to start doing. So kind of this mental process of, once you get access to a tool that can do everything you're trying to do, it can be difficult to kind of go from this, like, I can do all of these different things, to finding the thing to start doing first. And so can you talk us a little bit through the process of distilling what, you don't have to tell us what the idea is, because I know we've got, the launch coming up and everything, but maybe more on the side of, for those of people who are watching, how can they maybe sift through all of the potential ideas and distill those ideas down into the first project. So if I give you one example for my own process, it would be something like, let's say I work, or I have my own firm where I represent veterans that have disabilities. And I know about all of these different types of ways that they can get grant money in order to expand aspects of their home. And I would love to make this huge workflow where I cover every single type, or like this legal app that gives them every single option for what they might be able to get as, an outcome. But perhaps when I'm newer to a tool, I'm trying to launch something that I can see a return on very quickly. Perhaps instead of trying to go after every single grant, I can distill that idea down to seeing if they're eligible for one particular type of grant, testing that in the market, iterating on that product, and then either building that tool out to cover those other options or individually having those be separate options. So just from your own mindset and approach, how did you go about taking this tool that you learned about, getting excited about it, but then also distilling the idea down to something that you could start with?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, I mean, everybody's different, right? Like how you work and what motivates you, what excites you, what keeps you committed, right? Because those are key things, right? Like consistency and follow through is just really important. And I think as lawyers, we know that, we understand deadlines and things like that. But then when it comes to our creative side, for some of us, it can be a little bit challenging, right? And I think one thing important to keep in mind is that if you are inspired to do something, like you want to do something innovative, and your idea, you have several components to an idea or whatever, it's probably best to kind of take a step back. And because that's kind of what I did. I took a step back and I thought, what's more critical? What's more important? And at the same time, okay, I think this is an important piece. How impactful will it be? Is it going to have real impact? Or do I need to consider maybe adding something else? Because for me, two things that are really important as entrepreneurs, and especially in innovative tech space and innovation, is we want to make sure what you're doing is going to be impactful. And if it's impactful, does it have longevity? Number two. And also number three is it scalable? That's the other thing, right? Those are, I think, important things that it can be generalized in anything that anyone does when you're in the innovation space, be it tech or any kind of industry, right? So those are really key important things, I think, when you just have to take a step back and take a look at it. And then it's also another important piece as well, and I'm sure others that are listening have heard this before, but it needs to be said. Are you solving a problem? Right? In order to be impactful, you have to be solving a solution or a problem. And are you giving value? Right? And those things are going to be a key. And also, I think people need to understand what you're doing, the simplicity of it all, keeping it simple. And then at times, I think for me, because my motivation for doing it was to educate. I have an educational part of commitment, right? And mission for me was to educate the public about why lawyers do the way they do things and how they do it and why they do it. That was really important to me, and sort of set the new kind of dialogue out there. And because that was important to me, that had a huge impact on how I did things and the way I did it. And I think the other important thing that people need to understand, sometimes when they say, you don't want to eat an elephant, you got to take it one bite at a time. That's so important, because you can get lost in all of it. And when you get lost, then you can get discouragement, so it's really important that you just take things one at a time, not get overwhelmed, and do it in bite sizes and pieces. And then when you're doing that, when you get a win, it encourages you to further do something else, right? And that's where it also allows creativity to flow. I think that's another important thing when you're innovating. The mind space and the head space you have to have is real focus, and focus with joy. Like you have to enjoy what you're doing, and when you do that, then the creativity flows and your focus is clear, and that's where all of the innovation starts to begin as well. So I think those are really key important things.
Absolutely. And I think I love what you said around like commitment as well. And I think what you said about education is really important because, I saw that you have courses that you offer for your clients as well. So I think this is interesting because not only is it around education, but also access to justice, which is really important to you. So a lot of the time, I think we can sometimes think of access to justice as meaning that we won't bring in a lot of revenue. But sometimes what access to justice means is diversifying our business models in a way that allows us to have multiple options and multiple opportunities for unbundling our services in different pieces. So for you, for example, maybe you have a more educated consumer who comes, or a client who comes to you because they've already taken your course. So you can really spend your time with them focusing on what they really need from a human lawyer at that piece, because you've already pre-recorded some conversations that you would have had with them to educate them. And they have paid for those, but just in a smaller amount. So with this, right. And so with this kind of diversification of having, like you mentioned, you have accounting services and HR services, and there's all these different pieces to your business. How do you go about thinking about which pieces you're going to add on, and why did you choose to make it a tech product?
I think the reason being is the reason why I chose it to be more of a tech product, user friendly, is because my target audience was people who had a level of innovative minds themselves, who are business people. I mean, it can be used for existing businesses too. They don't necessarily have to be like startup space. But what I was thinking was more on the lines is that when there are going to be individuals, like my target audiences are going to be businesses that either are kind of further along but didn't do all the legal stuff yet that they should have, because you do get that a lot of times. Like, people don't understand it's important to have your legal foundation solid first and then kind of build your business. But sometimes not everybody can do that, and sometimes price point or budgets and things like that can play an issue and a factor as to why a client may not necessarily do that, right? And then there are others that are further along but thought, I need to do this, or we need to do something different or do it in a different way. So it is, what I've designed is designed for multi-purpose, but at the same time, it was at the fact that, okay, how do I help clients who are in the innovative space to start and to begin? Right? Because beginning is the most difficult part, right? And that's really important to kind of help them in key component of what I did. And I chose to do one thing. I think that's the other important thing that I have learned with, working with and hearing other entrepreneurs and how they've done things, is starting with one idea, and then building from there. They always say it's better to start with one and then build. And so that was also my motivation. And the access to justice part was how to empower entrepreneurs. How do you empower them? How do you get them to say, you know what, like, you don't have to be stuck, and you need to understand certain things. And so this tool was designed to empower them and also to be effectively accessible. But at the same time, I think it's also to tell individuals and the public too that, lawyers can be used for legal work that truly you cannot do on your own. Right? You know what I mean? And should you choose to do some on your own, well, you need to understand certain aspects of it. Right? And so that was sort of my motivation of it. And I felt that kind of flowed. And in terms of business model and how you can divide up what you do and the way you can scale it and do different things, by all means, you certainly can. And I think when you're designing something, one should always keep that in mind. And I tried to do that.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think one of the things that I think about a lot for you specifically, like you mentioned, you have this, this new practice and you have a small team, you have to think very carefully about your resources. So it can be scary as someone who has a solo or small practice to think about, how can I take time away from client work, which would bring revenue more quickly, to a more long-term strategy and idea of having multiple different assets to offer to our clients. So with that being said, how did you go about finding the people who you would need to get this project off the ground? if you needed, let's say, support on a technical side, if you needed to have someone helping with a website, for example, and then how did you balance how much you did by yourself versus how much you did with someone who was helping, basically?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of stuff that I thought to myself, whatever I'm capable of doing, and I felt that I had the capacity to do, I did it myself. But then I also recognized where, my strengths weren't. And so then it was a matter of reaching out to people. And I'll be honest with you, I I scrutinized who I would want to work with, and I also made sure that I went to trusted friends and colleagues and experts that I had a relationship with, that I could say to them, hey, do you know someone? And what do you think? But I wouldn't just be simply like, oh, okay, thanks for the name, and I'm going to hire this person. No, I made sure I took the time to talk to them, make sure I understood them, make sure that there was a sense of synergy and understanding for my vision and what I was doing, and they understood me, and that we could work together. And again, a lot of trial and error there too, but I'm happy to say, I did have success through that process, and have individuals now that I'm working with that I completely trust, and I'm so happy to work with. And it's great because they get excited about all the ideas I come up with. And we just like have just a great time doing it together. And I think that's really important, right? Like really enjoying what you're doing is something really important. And I think in terms of time management, I would want to say, yes, I'm probably a different personality in the sense that I can push, the envelope a little bit, but that doesn't mean that I'm not prone to burning out. So there's that. And also recognizing when you're burning out, like you have to kind of learn to do that and kind of catch it before you do. So that is an inherent weakness. I know that about myself, but I've come to learn to recognize that. But I think one other helpful tool was to work on things like this in periods of time in the calendar year, which I felt like, and mind you, this process I've been through has been 19 months. And development, testing, beta testing, all that kind of stuff. It was also finding those moments, and when is this a time that I can balance it more and do it? And when I recognized that time frame and period, I kind of just went for it, and then really utilized my time. I thought, okay, here's a window of opportunity. Like, some people could be like, I don't know, whenever your law practice is, or a time where it's a little bit, so let's say it was a month of March or something, or maybe the Christmas holidays or whatever, if there's that time frame that you can devote something to your idea and you take that time out and do it, then take the time and do it, stick it. And if you have to stretch the time a little bit because it's a sacrifice, nothing comes easy without sacrifice, right? Like, it's just the game when it comes to entrepreneurship. You have to have a level of sacrifice that needs to be done, but it will outweigh, you hope, the rewards, right, at the end of the day. So it's just kind of balancing that and having that goal in mind and the motivation to, complete it and stick to it. And, entrepreneurship is a roller coaster ride. It's never really smooth. And I think you have to have the tenacity to recognize that is how it's going to be, but to be able to have that innate drive within you to say, well, I'm going to keep going forward, especially if others tell you genuinely, who are experts and things like that, you're on the right track. I think the worst thing anybody can do to themselves is believe in their idea, but don't have the confirmation in that idea or the backing and legitimacy that goes along with that, right? So it's kind of recognizing that, and then once you do, then one should not give up. You just keep going, you just got to keep going.
I love that. And I love that you have the confidence in yourself. And even though you were seeking feedback, and, making sure that you were getting some idea validation, that you still trusted yourself and committed to the process.
I have to be truly honest here. There were tears. I want tears of frustration. I will not lie. It's like, what's going on? I'm getting so my God, can I ever do this? Will I ever cross the finish line? Like you do that, like total transparency, right? That happens, but it's okay. So long as you pull yourself up and you just keep going. That's what's important.
Absolutely. Now, I'd love to open it to questions from the audience. If anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute and ask, or just put it in the chat. And as people are kind of thinking about their questions or posting them in the chat, I think it's just really helpful to hear the perspective of someone who is going through this process and being willing to, be vulnerable enough to say, I'm scared along the process as well. But I'd love to recognize Dorna. Hi, Dorna. Thanks for being here.
Hi, thank you, Brittany, and thank you, Sukhi. Wow, what a powerful message and talk. I think it's just so inspiring to hear you speak. I was wondering, this is something that I think we hear from a lot of our customers is, and you are a prime example of this, you have so much going on in your life. You have a law practice, you have these 6-year-old twins, you want to start this legal tech business. How did you carve out the time and almost like force yourself to carve out the time when you know that you have so much going on to keep yourself on the right track to actually be able to launch, when sometimes it's easier to just keep your current practice going, even though you have the opportunity for something bigger. It's almost harder to pause and tackle that bigger opportunity.
Yeah, no, that's such a great question. Thank you so much. It's true. It's really difficult, but at the same time, I think you have to see the end game, right? As long as you keep the vision in mind and you see the vision and you know in your gut, you just know, you just got to do it, and you got to take the risk and you got to do it. That's a drive that can be so motivating. It can also sometimes be a high, right? In a way, like, you know what? So I get there, and I have to say, like, now fast approaching to getting there and being public about it very soon. I mean, in itself, it's nerve-wracking, right? At the same time, because again, there are going to be fellow colleagues that are going to be looking at it, maybe scrutinizing it and all that. But at the same time, it's still having a level of confidence of knowing I did my due diligence. I worked hard. I did what I did, and I gave my best and my all and my excellence in what I did, and just stand strong in that, and I think the other thing as lawyers, we all need to understand, and this is something else and might be a slightly off topic, but I think very much relevant here, is that we're not to show weakness, and we've got to stay strong or put on a persona that we are. Oh my God, let's change that. Let's get real. We have clients that want us to be real. We're humans at the end of the day. And, weakness is not something that should be looked down upon. If anything, it's weakness, but overcoming it and persevering, that is more stronger and shows a great sign of strength and agility and accomplishment. So I think when we talk from those angles and recognize, say, hey, I'm humble enough, or I'm willing to admit this, but you know what? I did A, B, C, D to help me get here now. There's nothing wrong with that. If anything, that should be celebrated. And I think if somebody does come to you and say, hey, I'm struggling here, I have an idea, but I've got my practice and I want to do this, but I'm feeling really weak, or I'm feeling really overwhelmed I'm feeling overwhelmed and I don't know if I can do this. Like, we need to come along each other, and encourage each other, male, female, doesn't matter. We come along each other and say, you know what, you can do this. And I think that's really important. And we need so much more innovation. Our industry, the legal field, whether it's in the States or in Canada, we haven't had substantial innovation or change in over 30 years. The pandemic hit and we all of a sudden have video conferencing client meetings, and it was all forced upon us, right? And all of a sudden things started to push, and tech world started to come in and say, okay, well, we got a lot more to offer if you guys are opening up, right? And it just kind of overflowed from there. Not that we didn't already have like AI in Nexus or things like that. Those platforms still using as research tools and stuff like that was there. It's been there, but it's becoming the more forefront. And all I'm saying is we need to encourage each other, right? there's enough room for innovation and change in our industry that needs to happen, but we have to do it wisely. And I think there has to be a lot of governance, and we have to follow the rules, because it still protects the public, and in the end, it protects us and our professional liabilities as well. So doing it with a sense of transparency and competency and governance, I think, are really key things. And that just will change public perception and how we do law in the coming years. So for me, to be part of that journey and be inspiring to be part of that journey, as crazy and, with little, tech background and green light that I was, to be able to still do it. I still believe in that. And I would encourage others to do the same. If you're inspired, go for it. Absolutely. It's worth it.
I love that. Thank you so much. And that actually puts us right at time for anyone who needs to go now. Feel free to go. I'm just going to wrap us up with a few announcements. And if you'd like to stay on for 5 minutes of speed networking, we'll do that as well. But I just wanted to first thank Sukhi for your time and for being willing to share all that's going on. And as you mentioned, we'll probably do one in the future as well, where we're able to kind of actually highlight what you built, because right now there's a little bit of confidentiality going on. So we want to make sure that we respect that. And then our next speaker will actually be Francesca Little, who is here on the call with us right now. Hi. So she's going to be talking on the topic, automating immigration law for good, one lawyer's mission to use tech to protect refugees. And I just absolutely love this. And I love her because she was one of my fellows in the Gavel Law Students in Legal Tech Access to Justice Fellowship. So I'm just going to stop the recording here and just say thank you to Sukhi, and we'll go into speed networking.